Now, the way that they're supposed to use that hack-a-pick is to club the seal with the hammer end of that spike, and then they use the spike to actually drag the animal across the ice. But what we saw this year and what we've seen in other years is them using the metal spike, literally stabbing the seal through the skull with the metal spike repeatedly. And I saw it this year, I saw it last year, I saw it the year before, and we've caught it on film.
Now, maybe we can start talking about why this is even happening. My understanding from having interviewed representatives of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society is it's their view that this is a big subsidized almost kind of a welfare program for fishermen who are out of work some portion of the year, and also a way for the Canadian government to point the finger at the seal as a supposed culprit in the reduction of the cod fishery, when in fact it's overfishing by humans and their own bad management that has caused such a huge reduction in the cod fishery, and that these harp seals are just a scapegoat, basically. So what is your view on this? Why is this still happening? And what do you think the real motivations are behind it?
Well, those are very, very accurate descriptions of what's going on. The fact is that sealers are commercial fishermen. They earn 95% of their income from regular fisheries and less than 5% from killing seals. We know that the Canadian government has a political incentive to support the commercial seal hunt. Right now, all three major federal parties support the commercial seal hunt, and they do it for a very simple reason. On the east coast of Canada, where the seal hunt goes on, fisheries issues are voting issues, and people will vote for a candidate based on their position on the commercial seal hunt. And of course, on the east coast of Canada, many people are in favor of the seal hunt. In the rest of Canada, the overwhelming majority of people are opposed to the commercial seal hunt and want it to stop, but they tend to vote on things like health care and education and not on the seal hunt. So the federal parties know that by supporting the seal hunt, they stand to gain a few votes on the east coast of Canada, and they don't risk losing them anywhere else. And that's a political equation that we simply have to change in Canada for the sake of the seals. Another reason why the hunt goes on is exactly as you said. Back in the 1990s, we saw the collapse of northern cod off the east coast of Canada, and that was one of the most infamous examples of resource mismanagement, I think, anywhere in the world. 40,000 people in Atlantic Canada lost a source of income when that happened, and the federal government scrambled to find something to blame that would have been beyond their control, and seals were at the top of the list, despite the fact that there was not a shred of credible evidence anywhere in the world to suggest this was the case. The federal government spent tons of money, of public money, trying to prove that seals had caused the collapse of northern cod. And in the end, their own science proved that seals had nothing to do with the collapse, that the cause was quite simply overfishing, human overfishing. It's truly unfortunate that the myths that were created at that time about the impact of seals on cod persist today. And that's one of the reasons why on the east coast of Canada people support the commercial seal hunt, because they honestly believe that killing seals will somehow help bring fish stocks back. But the tragic reality is that all of the best available science today shows the more marine mammals you have in the ecosystem, the better it is for all fish stock recovery. And unfortunately, the Canadian government has been tremendously lax about correcting the myths that are out there. And of course, they have a reason not to correct those myths, because if they were to do so, it would be admitting responsibility for the collapse of northern cod, and politically, that would be very disastrous for the federal government. So, there's a clear reason why the federal government supports this hunt. But I do think that many Canadians now are starting to ask the right questions. If this hunt it brought in about $12 million last year. If you look at it, last year we spent $3.4 million rescuing sealers and getting their boats out of the ice floes because they'd become trapped in them when they went out to hunt seals. We spent another $7.9 million repairing boats that were damaged in the ice. And, of course, there is an international boycott of Canadian seafood products that is focused largely in the United States that has caused a serious decline in the amount and the value of Canadian seafood exports to the United States. And when you start looking at that combined with all of the international condemnation we receive as a nation about the continuation of the hunt, you have to start asking some questions about whether the continuation of this marginal industry is worth the cost that it's causing Canada. And I think many Canadians are now starting to ask whether maybe it might be within our economic interest to shut down the commercial seal hunt.
My understanding is that the seals actually feed on larger fish that eat cod, so they're keeping the numbers down of the bigger fish that are eating cod. They're actually helping the numbers of cod, and that's my understanding.
That's absolutely correct. Seals, like all marine mammals, are a vital part of the ecosystem in the Northwest Atlantic, and harp seals, which are the target of the commercial seal hunt, are what we call opportunistic feeders. That means they eat little bits of lots of different species, and most of what they eat are actually fish that are predators of commercially targeted fish stocks. So removing seals would actually increase the predator populations in the Northwest Atlantic and cause a further decline in the commercially fished fish stocks. So it's quite simple. If you kill harp seals, you're reducing the chances for fish stocks to recover. But the popular belief and the popular conception of this issue is that the more seals there are out there, the less fish there will be for humans. And that's something that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans has been instrumental in perpetuating.
So you pointed out that the seal hunt last year brought in about $12 million, but that about that same amount was spent on rescuing sealers that had, ran into trouble or repairing their boats. It sounds like about $12 million spent every year just on that. And then you factor in the boycotts of Canadian seafood focused in the U.S., as you said. It's really hurting them financially. So why are they continuing? Is it all about not wanting to admit that they blew it and totally destroyed the cod fishery?
I think the Canadian government painted itself into a bit of a corner back in the 1990s by blaming seals for cod stocks collapsing. I think at this point it would be very difficult for the Canadian government to save face and end the commercial seal hunt at the same time. However, we think we have a solution. We're proposing that the federal government actually implement a buyout of the sealing industry. And that would be a compensation package for the fishermen who are involved in the hunt, which would probably put more money into their pockets than the commercial seal hunt ever would. We think this is something that would be welcomed by the sealing industry as a whole. I don't know if you've been following the headlines, but this year 4 sealers died in the commercial seal hunt when their boat capsized, and we've had several other boats that have become destroyed when they've been trapped in the ice and had other incidents out at sea. So this is a very high-risk activity for the people involved. They know it, and I think if they were offered compensation to simply stay home, they would be very happy to take it. But we need the federal government to want this hunt to end, and I think we need to bring even more pressure to bear on them, and that's why the Canadian seafood boycott is so important. Only by boycotting Canadian seafood products can we provide an economic incentive for the Canadian government to shut down the hunt. And that's what we're trying to do right now. If people visit hsus.org or protectseals.org, which are our 2 websites that both talk about the commercial seal hunt, people will see that out there in the United States, we have hundreds of thousands of people and thousands of businesses that have already pledged to avoid some or all Canadian seafood until the hunt is ended for good. We need even more. So we need everybody out there who cares about seals to make the very simple switch, buy American seafood as opposed to Canadian seafood. Just choose not to buy Canadian seafood and tell the Canadian government you're doing it. And all of that, all the resources to do that can be found on protectseals.org.
I'm speaking with Rebecca Aldworth. She is the Director of Canadian Wildlife Issues for the Humane Society. For the past 10 years, she has been a first-hand observer of Canada's commercial seal hunt, escorting over 100 scientists, parliamentarians, and journalists to the ice floes to witness the slaughter. Rebecca, my understanding is that the Canadian government has been very aggressive this year in preventing some people from witnessing this hunt, and not just groups like the Humane Society and the International Fund for Animal Welfare and Sea Shepherds, but journalists and others. They seem pretty focused on keeping people away. In fact, I know that the Coast Guard, one of the Canadian Coast Guard ships rammed the Farley Moat, which is a ship with the Sea Shepherds. And also recently, I'm not sure of the exact date on that. They actually stormed the Farley Moat. I believe it was on April 11th or 12th.